I'll have to alert my human resources department.
Well, you know what's even worse? You know, to sort of, you know, go flat. I offered him, you know, some severance. He felt like I knew everything.
Right, it was a nice thing to do.
But he had to sign a release.
Right.
Of course.
And he wouldn't do
And
it?
he had 8 days to do it. And he never signed it. So he left all this money on the table.
I would call
With-
my human resource lawyer, get ready for MCAD or something.
You know,
You got potential. That's just,
my attitude on that is
But
if he can find somebody, he doesn't have the dough, if he can find somebody to take it on.
correct.
let's do that.
I called my lawyer, just
So he's obviously angry. Oh, really? Well,
What are you doing?
yeah.
It's only a matter. You've been on 2 performances.
Good.
talk with physician.
That was the problem. You didn't do anything.
You have a good job description.
Paper trail.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, you know, anyway.
I may have a copy machine, but I have no one that is so, who's sold
But I meant
the.
to tell the story, so I went in to get the printer out of his office. You know, it's the one I've been using as a paper, like that, and so. And I purposely not hooked up to our network.
Right.
And so I brought it back into the office that I use, hooked it up. The printer is so old that the software drivers are not available. We'll buy it up.
So, good afternoon. We have a quorum. I'd like to call the meeting of the Finance Committee for this day to order. Is there any public comment to come before us today on a subject that's not on the agenda? Okay. So, do you have an agenda? There's an agenda. I didn't make a copy. So our, let's just kind of review the order today. We're going to have a public hearing on the citizen warrant articles for the 2016 annual meeting. We'll then adjourn the public meeting and have a regular Finance Committee meeting by reviewing the minutes, financing options for sewer project, our draft meeting schedule, and our date of our next meeting. With us is Town Council John Giorgio, welcome. I'm sure you've had an opportunity to work with several of the citizen warrant article sponsors and getting their. So we appreciate that and appreciate the town making the resource of Putnam Page available for our citizens. So with that, what we do is we're going to go through each article one by one. I'd like to call it and ask if anyone would like to make a comment on it, anyone from the public. If you're a sponsor or you're also welcome to come and speak. We had our review of articles last Monday. Many people were not able to come, but this is another opportunity for you to talk to us. I did want to, we'll open and close the public hearing, but we will not be taking any action on the citizen warrant articles. We do that during our normal review and recommendation for the warrant. I just wanted to this is for the benefit of the Finance Committee. As you know, we have seen a large number of zoning bylaw citizen warrant articles. And I know we wondered about that and questioned that, but in talking to Andrew Vorst today, apparently the planning board had taken a position in public that they were actually encouraging citizens to come forward with citizen articles for zoning, and that they felt that that was a better vehicle for this juncture based on last year to give issues of zoning a broad community conversation, and as they've done, and many of them are which that the planning board and planning staff would support. And once they come before us, they'll go back into that queue. But come into that with a sponsor as a citizen warrant article. I thought it was a little interesting. I didn't know that, but that's probably the answer why we're seeing so many. So we have these in alphabetical order. As I said, I've called the meeting, public hearing meeting to order. I'll just read the description. And if anybody wants to speak on it, just stand up and start speaking or sit down. The first is, and we tend not to have a conversation about it. This is an opportunity for you to speak. We may ask questions, but I'll start with the zoning map change 8 Massaquoi. Zoning map change Marble Way. Acquisition and disposition, 2 articles of Woodbine. Charter amendment for the town clerk appointment. Exempting flyboards from section 137-18 of the charter.
So in regards to that,
Great. Come forward. In fact, you want to, have a seat and sit down
my
and
name
just.
is Max Perkins, one of the
Oh,
owners
nice.
of the company.
Great. Yeah.
Nice to
See
meet
you as you're the sponsor, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Wasn't able to make the meeting on December 7th. I was away traveling.
That's right.
Just want to know if you guys had any questions that arose during your meeting on the 7th regarding what we're trying to do with this bylaw change.
Well, we didn't, it's like, because you weren't here, we didn't have a lot of conversation
Okay.
about it, so maybe you want to just give us the
Sure.
highlights, if you would.
So flyboarding is a revolutionary new sport on the waterfront that utilizes the power of a jet ski to propel a person who's strapped into a board in the air. It's a new extreme sport that's gaining popularity throughout the world. So the biggest concern with it is that it uses a jet ski as its main source of power, and according to 137-18, jet skis are prohibited from use inside the harbor. This was written before the sport was invented, and so my brother and I both feel very strongly that the basis of the law should remain intact. That jet skis used in the conventional manner should not be operated inside the harbor to kind of keep the occupants safe, the swimmers, the boaters, and everything. But with a jet ski engaged in a flyboard operation, it is rendered motionless. It can't operate in the conventional manner. You pull the throttle and it shoots forward. The only purpose it serves is just to propel somebody up in the air. So, we've written this article right here with the proposed amendment to the bylaw to just allow flyboarding in the harbor, but to also kind of cover the tracks. You need to have a captain's license. You need to be a certified instructor. You need to have X, Y, and Z for insurance. So we want to make it not difficult for other people to do it, but we want to make sure that if someone is going to do it, they're not going to take liberties and put other people at risk. So that's our biggest concern.
So I'll ask town council to jump in if we're doing something we shouldn't do, or, some, but, so.
Oh, I will.
Okay, good. So, Joe, and
I'm just curious, the way these flyboards operate, is a jet ski the only way to, obviously it operates as a pump, right? To
Yes.
pump water. Are there other mechanisms? I mean, could you have a water pump on a boat or a water pump on a platform to do the same thing?
That was one of the concerns that we had, or one of the options that we had, when we started the company. The reason why they chose to use a jet ski is because it's designed to have certain safety features and other mechanisms present to keep both the instructor and the occupant safe. We explored just throwing a floating dock in the water with just an emergency pump on it, but flyboarding, you're maneuverable on the board, so you can't just have a huge dock connected to the hose. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to move anywhere. You want to have a little bit of freedom. The jet ski will kind of tow around with the person on the board. So, that being said, the jet ski, they're built according to Coast Guard regulations. So, when we're operating a business on the water, so we have to adhere to Coast Guard standards as well.
So when someone's doing one of these flyboard boards, I guess I've seen them, you go up in the air and then you basically tow the pump, the jet ski around, so to speak, as you maneuver around the fly board.
Yes, exactly.
Is there a question?
Yeah.
Has the Marine Department weighed in on the proposal of having it inside the harbor?
We've talked to Sheila about it, and we've also talked to Chief Pittman. You know, they said that they like our business model. You know, I've held my captain's license for the past 7 years, going on 8 years now. My brother's currently studying for his, so, you know, they said that, you know, if there were going to be people to do it, you know, we would be the right people for the job. You know, we have certain areas of the harbor that we have designated where we would operate it. It's outside the channel. You know, we need to have at least 10 feet of water for safety reasons. You know, but we're outside the channel and away from the major areas of boat traffic, so, you know, we'd be well out of the way from anything going on. Yeah.
So maybe I missed it because, I mean, most of the harbor is only 6 feet deep, maybe even shallower. So you're trying to, where's the area?
So there's an area inside of First Bend, right outside the channel, where it's roughly 20 feet of water.
Okay.
There's an area in Pest House Channel, just to the east of Hussey Shoal, where we're not anchoring in the eelgrass. Would be, you know, where there's a bunch of sailboats up by Monomoy that anchor up in Pest House. There's a 10-foot area right around there, and then also off of Hulbert Avenue. I'm blanking on the buoy number, but it's kind of between Hulbert and Jetties Beach. There's an area off to the west side of the channel there that we'd be able to operate as well.
So first I'll ask you about the eelgrass. I mean, everybody's worried about eelgrass and the scallops and everything, and that massive amount of water that's being pumped, and as you dive down and you come up and it's spraying water underwater. Does it affect the scallops, the eelgrass, the bottom of the harbor? Does it disturb it at all?
Not at all, because the jet ski is going to be sitting on the surface of the water 10 feet above the bottom, so any water that's drawn in is going to be sucked in through the jet ski. And you know, when you're on the jet ski, or when you're on the flyboard, the water that's pumped out is immediately dispersed through the water, and it's not going to have any effects going down 10 or so feet to the eelgrass.
David?
So a couple of questions. So you're tethered to a jet ski.
Yeah.
And the jet ski is mobile while going through the water.
The jet ski remains more or less motionless. The flyboarder can tow the jet ski at very slow speeds through the water, you know, for directionals. You know, if a current's bringing you, or, you know, the wind's pushing you, you know, you can, at a very low RPM, just ask the rider on the flyboard to just head in one direction to kind of bring the jet ski around. But at throttle, the jet ski cannot move at all. So wherever the person on the flyboard is where the jet ski will be.
And how long is the tether?
We have a 55-foot hose, and so when a person's up in the air, you know, they're within a 110-foot diameter circle. You know, so it's very well contained.
And where, two questions that sort of relate to the location. One is, inside the harbor, there's an awful lot of use that's going on already. How does somebody in the town regulate that particular use? I mean, for example, between First and Second Point is heavily used by recreational boaters. On the weekends, a lot of racing going on. There may be classes from community sailing and the like taking place. How do you do you just get in the queue and fight for your space, or? And then the second part of that question, where would you operate it from?
So we'd be picking people up from Children's Beach, the public pier there. You know, we've already, last season we were operating outside of the East Jetty, and while that, you know, was functional, we were severely limited due to weather. On the note of weather, that's going to be a big determination as to, you know, where we'd preferably like to operate. You know, we do have those 3 areas set out to have backup options, you know, find the area of least use, and we'll find a way to have our own space. You know, we're avoiding other traffic and not creating a hazard for anyone. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess ultimately
Yeah.
you're given.
Yeah, of course.
How many units are you able to operate at a given time?
We only operate one jet ski and one flyboard at a time.
Is that in this?
It's not, just, all we want to do is just create a definition for what it means to flyboard, because as of right now in the bylaws, they're classified under other similar devices, such as water pumps, and so it's very vague, and, they're, again, it said, it's not clear enough, so they're banned within the harbor. So we just want to create this instrument right here to shed a little bit more light on it and to create a special exemption for them.
Well, you could operate on the east, on the Cotu side of the east jetty, right?
We did, under circumstances where, the harbors are very busy, there's weekends where, as you said, a lot's going on, so, we could do that. It's a lot safer to operate inside the harbor, we're less susceptible to wind and waves and everything. It just provides a more relaxed environment.
John, I didn't remember, is this, what was your comment on this?
So, I said this was approved as the form, but if Finance Committee decides to make a positive motion, I think we'll have to tweak the language a little bit to make sure it fits well in the existing bylaw, which
Okay.
is section 137. And I believe that this bylaw amendment will require, if it's approved by town meeting, it will require not just the Attorney General, but I believe the Division of Waterways will have to approve it as well, the state. But, conceptually, I think it's certainly approved as the form.
Why would everybody else have to chime in on the waterways and all those people?
Well, the Attorney
It's
General
changing.
has to approve all bylaws.
Okay.
And I believe that, the DEP would say that this is regulating, watercraft in navigable water, and I believe that they may have to weigh in as well.
The Coast Guard just passed regulations this past year also regarding these. They classified the jet skis as a commercial vehicle, so now they require the instructor to not only be a licensed flyboard instructor, to have a minimum of a six-pack captain's license as well.
You said the Coast Guard, correct?
The Coast Guard, yeah.
So whatever steps we'll have to go through to get this approved, if it passes it.
Any other questions? Anything else you'd like to say?
I think that's it.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, you guys.
So,
Jim?
yes, Tom. Oh, I'm sorry. Anyone else here to speak on this article?
Comment on it, Jim. It's, the original regulation for the banning of jet skis was because more about the noise issue.
Hmm.
And this is a stationary jet ski. Jet ski really is there for propulsion purposes.
Right.
As far as what David asked about who goes where, there is no set area, David. All of the sailing clubs and everything else, it's all a navigable waterway. They set up according to the wind. It's part of being on the water all the time. I watched this operation the last couple of years, and they are greatly limited by the number of days they can work outside the jetty. It's not even if it's a windy day, but just there's so many boat wakes from the berries and everything else that it just becomes unsafe. So this would not really affect that section of the harbor, and it would be much safer for them than for the people on it. But this wasn't around when we
Right.
put the jet ski rules in place.
Any other comments from the public? All right, thanks again, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for, the next item is home rule petition, charter amendment, term limits. Bobby, Would you like to speak to that?
Um,
Come right up.
no,
Come right up and,
This is something that I've been thinking about for a while. I see numerous boards, whether elected or appointed, that have members on them for years and years and years, and I always try to get new people involved in town government, and they're very apprehensive to go against someone who's been there for a long time, either an elected or an appointed position. I think that turnover is good, fresh ideas is good. I'm not saying you can never go back to the board, but you have to take a year off. All the nonprofit boards that I've served on, you have a 1 or 2 term limit, you take a year off, and then you can come back. And with the highest office, elected office in the land, has a term limit. So why shouldn't we? John, when I talked to John about this article, he researched it, and this is pretty much what they have in Provincetown, John.
Yes,
So it is done in other towns. So I feel that it would be a good thing for Nantucket.
questions from the finance committee members? Look,
I know, I see, things like the HDC, and the organizations we love to hate, and, but we obviously wouldn't get rid of them. But a lot of those boards, I mean, do you really think we could find qualified people that would put that kind of time in?
Yep, I do. Nobody wants to run against a 4 or 5 term incumbent, and I've heard from some of these board members who are on these boards that say it takes 3 to 4 terms to get them to know the board or to understand how the system works. Well, in my mind, that's the reason why nobody wants to run for the office, because when they come into a board like that with someone who's been there that long, they don't get to express their opinion. They get told what their opinion's going to be. I think there are people out there that will run for these seats, especially if they're open. And if there aren't, then we'll revisit it. But just to say we're not going to do this because no one's going to run is not, in my mind, good government. We have 8,500 registered voters here. Somebody will put their name in for these positions.
John, did you have a comment?
I did have 2 comments, actually, Mr. Chairman. One is that this isn't really a legal comment, but I've been representing Provincetown for many years, and I've seen how this term limit charter provision works. And what often happens is when somebody reaches the end of that 3rd term, they'll take a year off. They might serve on another board, but then if they really want to, after a year, they come back. So I've seen a lot of that in Provincetown, and gives people an opportunity to look at another kind of service for the town, and as I said, they come back. So that's the one comment I wanted to make. The other one I wanted to make was just to make sure the Finance Committee and the public understands the distinction between number E and number G. They're both charter amendments. The way Bobby has drafted, well, I drafted it, but under his instructions, or request was that this is a home rule petition, which means that it requires a simple majority vote of town meeting, and then it goes to the legislature for approval. And if the legislature simply approves it, it goes into effect, or they could add a provision that requires a ballot question. Mr. Grouse's charter amendment, which has to do with the town clerk, he decided to draft that as what I call a simple charter amendment, which is a different procedure but the same result. It's a 2/3 vote of town meeting, approval by the Attorney General, and then it does have to go on the ballot at next annual or actually state election. So they're both perfectly valid ways. There are pros and cons to each, but I just wanted to make sure you understood the difference between the 2 procedures.
May I just ask, can you comment on their experience at Provincetown about how long they had this, and what's your perception of the communities? Are they happy they did it, or unhappy? Or is that
Well, you might want to talk to some people in Provincetown, because I don't really want to speak for them.
Okay.
I have not heard a great deal of complaining about it. They do have a charter enforcement commission in Provincetown that is very protective I would say, of their charter, including the term limits provision. They actually have a lot of enforcement power. And it, in my experience or observation, it seems to work. And Provincetown is a community where it's not that easy to find people
Right.
to run. So, but they never seem to have a problem getting people, good people, to run for selectmen and school committee, and obviously the appointed boards as well.
And the other comment, the question was, how long has it been in force?
You know, it's been in effect for a very long time.
Oh, okay, okay.
I think it's been in effect for at least 20 years,
Oh,
because
okay.
there's a sitting member of the select who was 9 years, took a couple of years off, and now she's back on the board. So it's at least 20 years. that
Okay,
that was-
great.
it's done.
David?
John, did the charter amendment arise out of the same set of circumstances, that there were just people on boards in perpetuity, or did it arise from a different?
I really can't speak to the motivation, I'm sorry.
Stephen?
Are you aware of other towns? I mean, Provincetown's one example, but are there other examples you could cite?
I'm sure there are. I can't name any off the top of my head. The towns that I work in mostly, it's only Provincetown. But this is not that unusual a concept at the local level, is my perception.
Any comments from others in the public on this citizen article? Anything else you want to say?
No, I just, I felt that, that 3 terms, a 9-year length is a good run, and then, as John said, you can take a year off, and it doesn't mean that because you're not on that board, you can't still participate. These are all public meetings. They can come, they can make public comment, they can listen, they can be involved. So, I just, I thought it was time.
Okay, great. All right.
Okay.
Thanks for being here. Oh, I'm sorry.
You know, I've been on this board a long time, and I can remember when we were having trouble, but then when some of us got real active about trying to dig up candidates, it wasn't that hard. I mean, there are a lot of people out there that it's like Bobby was saying. In some ways, they're reluctant to step forward. It might be because of incumbents, or it might be a lot of other things, but when I found that when you ask people, would you be, would you be interested? You get a pretty good return on that.
I could tell you that one of the most difficult positions I feel I've been put in as a selectman is voting against an incumbent who's been there for several terms in the appointing process. And I'm not saying that I have done it, and I've taken heat for it. So I think this would make that process a little easier. It's also very difficult, as John just said. I've gone around and tried to get people to put their names in, and they really don't want to go against a 3 or 4 or 5 term sitting incumbent. It's very difficult. But if they knew a place was being vacated because their term was up, they would probably gladly put their names in.
Just to clarify, is it 3 terms and then a year off?
3 consecutive terms, then you'd have to take a year off, then you could reapply. Or rerun for election.
It's also, it could be, if it's more than a half a term, that's considered a full term. If it's less than a half a term, that's not. So potentially somebody could be on for a total of 11 years at the time. Or as few as 8.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The next article is home rule petition right to farm. Anyone here to speak on that? Come right up and have a seat. Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is John Cuspa. I'm chairman of the Agricultural Commission, and we had, kind of gotten the idea for the right to farm bylaw, and then, Dylan, who was here earlier in the week, is the citizen sponsoring it. I was away, so I apologize for not being there. I understand there's some questions, and I'm not sure exactly what Dylan talked to you about, so I just want to do a quick overview if people don't mind. The main points about this is that, we're not making this up. This is typically the first thing that an agricultural commission does when it's formed. There's 142 other towns in Massachusetts with this bylaw with the exact same wording. And it applies to commercial agriculture only, and it does not in any way change the state laws. It's kind of like being an Arbor Day town or a bicycle-friendly community. It's just something affirming the town's commitment to agriculture as a economic opportunity for people to live here. It is part of the state's Smart Growth Toolkit. It's something that they recommend as well. That's pretty much, those are my big talking points about it. I know there was a couple questions about maybe it taking power away from town agencies and giving it to the AgCom. Does that sound right? Was that one of the concerns that came up on Monday? All that this is supposed to do is ensure that these disputes and claims, that the Agriculture Commission is made aware of them, because we, as an advisory committee to the town, could help you out. There's nothing in the language that says that you have to listen to us. We're merely advising. So that's that one. The other thing was about does it allow noise, dust, and smells 24/7? Is that correct that was a concern?
Yes.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are not aware of the different state laws and how they work. I certainly wasn't until I started looking into it for agriculture, and I printed out some copies of pertinent state laws if anyone wants to see them, so if you guys can pass those around. Basically, it only applies to commercial agriculture and what's considered a generally accepted agricultural practice. So, tilling up your field in the middle of the night, I wouldn't, in a residential neighborhood, I would not call one of those practices. And it does not change any of the laws as they're stated by the state. Yes.
Did you read, what, I'm assuming you read this very carefully, what we're looking at here?
Yes.
As, right to farm bylaw.
Yes.
Because, something like this, and my problem is I don't know a lot about what I'm reading. I'm not a farmer and I don't. So, all right, so the way it's written, specifically, you're okay with?
Yes. Yes, we did look through it, and there were a couple very minor changes that we added to it. But it's basically verbatim from, basically from the state. And it's the same one a lot of other towns have.
All sizes don't fit all,
Correct.
And so that's, when people say, well, this comes out of some type of file, you sit there and say, well, okay.
No, that makes total sense. I mean, we did look through it, and we did make some small changes. I honestly do not remember exactly what they were. That we changed a little bit of the wording.
It was very minor.
Yeah.
Language changes. One thing, I'm sorry, should I?
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm Michelle Bailey, I'm the vice chair of the Ag Commission, and just one thing I wanted to mention, John, I don't know if you were planning on getting to it, but there had been a question, I think, from the Finance Committee about whether it would be too burdensome to ask the town to notify residents of the fact that we're a right to farm community if the law were to pass. We looked into what they do in other towns where the law has passed, and they usually ask the assessor's office to just include a little leaflet and stuff they would be sending out anyway. So it was probably the cost of a ream of paper annually to do it that way. So
Have a seat, you're welcome to join us. David, I think you have some questions.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a hypothetical. This right to farm includes agritourism. So my hypothetical is, and I love the place, so I'm not picking on them, but they're something we know. So Cisco Brewers grows hops, runs their operation under the right to farm. It strikes me that the town would have no control over hours of operation, noise, and their general running of the business that they run, including music, because that would be considered agritourism underneath your proposal.
This-
John,
and
do
I-
you want to comment on that, John?
Yeah, I'm gonna, if I can jump in.
Please do.
Because I've been listening to this very intently. I don't think that's an issue here under this bylaw, because it's very clear that all of the town's other regulations and state law apply. So this is all of the town's general bylaws on noise, lighting, the zoning bylaw, all apply. And this doesn't exempt anyone from those regulations. It's really almost, well, except for two provisions, it's mostly just aspirational that Nantucket declares it's a right to farming community. There's the notice requirement, which is not aspirational, that is a legal requirement. And then there's a mediation process that's offered if a neighbor has a complaint about a farming operation next door. They can proceed to request enforcement. They could file their own lawsuit, or as an alternative, they could go and ask the Agricultural Commission to mediate that dispute. So I would also point out, I think there may have been some questions earlier at your early meeting about whether this means that, if there was a piggery next door, you couldn't do anything about it. Well, the Board of Health has broad statutory authority to regulate what are known as noisome trades. And one of the noisome trades, when you read the cases, are piggeries. They're noisy, they're smelly, there are all sorts of other things, and they need a site assignment from the Board of Health. They need to be approved by the Board of Health in order to operate. This bylaw would not change that. Now, I'm not advocating for it, but I'm just giving you the facts. And it is basically the same form that you can find on the Secretary of Energy. It's on the website. So there are some requirements, but they're limited, and it doesn't affect any of the other town laws. As a matter of fact, if you look at
Well, John, can you address the Salisbury case then?
the Salisbury case.
Mass case where there was a wedding venue that was set up under the agritourism provision of this statute that Salisbury put in place. It's verbatim, because you can look at, it's the same wording repeated 140 times across the Commonwealth. And they had an issue. They went to court over that because the town, once they passed it, it's my understanding, and this is, I think, where we were looking the other day for your involvement, did not, they ultimately, I think, mediated out, but that the court decided in favor of the right to farm law and the operation of the wedding venue on a farm. I mean, basically, that's why my particular concern is an agritourism concern. I think the rest of the goals are laudable, but
I'd have to look at that case specifically, but I can tell you that I had a case this past summer where someone was attempting to use land that was subject to an agricultural preservation restriction as a wedding venue, and that's not an agricultural use. So, but I don't know the specific facts of the case you're talking about. It could very well have been a zoning question, because as you know, you cannot regulate, or agricultural uses are exempt from regulation under a zoning bylaw. And we see people pushing the envelope on that exemption all the time. They set up a farm stand, and then they start bringing in stuff from all over the place, and then all of a sudden it's a food vendor.
yeah. Well, I mean, to my point, it's agritourism.
Yes.
And so at what point does the town lose its zoning powers?
The town never loses its zoning powers.
But that's what you just said. I mean, people push the envelope, and under the agritourism provision of the right to farm,
the building inspector enforces the zoning bylaw. So if there is an allegation that someone is not engaging in a legitimate commercial agricultural use, which would otherwise be exempt from zoning, the remedy that the town has is to bring an enforcement action under zoning.
So I go to Cisco Brewers, they
Yes.
grow hops, they
Yes.
decide to get into the beer making business.
Yes.
Then they decide that, they're gonna have the venues that they have and, do the activities that they do. It strikes me, the way this is written, that somebody else could do the same thing in another location and get into a Cisco Brewers type business without, and because of the agritourism provision, and basically circumvent the town's.
I think you're right.
Requirements.
I think you're right in the sense that, let's take that, let's just use a totally hypothetical situation, where somebody is pushing the envelope on the agricultural use exemption, and the building inspector takes enforcement action, and in court, they mount a defense. Well, Nantucket has the right to farm by law, and that supersedes the zoning act. That's the argument they have to make. And, it might cost you some money in terms of litigation expenses, but I do not see that as prevailing. I just don't. I believe there's a specific reference in here to the fact that it does not affect, it does not impinge on the town's ability to enforce its zoning bylaw. But agricultural uses under the zoning bylaw are very tricky. Because at what point does it morph into something more than strictly an agricultural use? And that's where most of the litigation has been, but within the context of zoning.
Precisely, and ergo my concern about those two words, agritourism, being part of this, because I think it has the potential to, it's potentially
It
a
would muddy the
slippery
waters,
slope.
yeah.
It muddies the waters, and, agritourism has become a fairly big industry in many, many locations, and certainly, on an expanding global basis. So,
I would also point out that Article U is a bylaw that regulates nuisance animals, that purports to, including crowing roosters. So if this passes and Article U passes, I would not say that this agricultural bylaw would trump a general bylaw that prohibits crowing roosters as a result, if they are a nuisance to a neighbor. So, I mean, they're a little bit different. Well, I don't want to say they're exactly in conflict, but those two articles are heading in two different directions, I would think.
Could I comment on that?
Sure.
In terms of the way the laws around what could be considered commercial agriculture, my understanding is that you can't suddenly start an agricultural operation. It has to have been in existence for at least 2 years if there's a complaint against it. So say someone just randomly decides they're going to start keeping chickens, and they don't really understand much about keeping chickens, and they decide that roosters are fun, and the rooster is making noise. They're not an agricultural operation unless they've been in a business making more than at least $1,000 per acre for at least 2 years. So therefore, they wouldn't have a leg to stand on. So just to put that in context, there isn't really a conflict between a well-written law around nuisance animals and a right to farm bylaw, because a person, presumably someone practicing commercial agriculture, understands how to manage livestock and animals. And your chickens and your hens and your roosters should be inside at night, and they know that.
So
Can
let
you-
me just ask a question. Is that term real critical to your,
The language of agritourism?
right?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's a deal breaker, I guess, for us. I haven't really thought about it as much, but,
Because I hear town council saying, don't worry about it, but you should, we have a lot of other protections. It may muddy the waters, so I just am trying to look for some.
And I would just add that it could potentially complicate litigation if enforcement action is brought.
And I'd just like to give an overview of kind of the intent of how I see the Agricultural Commission working, is that we would like to encourage good farming practices and people who want to do that as their economic ability. That's in our mission statement. But at the same time, define and help educate people for good farming practices. We're not, we are for commercial agriculture only, so we're not necessarily advocating, people throwing a pig in their backyard or a sheep in their backyard or a rooster in the backyard. That's not really what we're trying to do. We're trying to promote it as a legitimate commercial venture for people who'd like to do that as a different kind of way of life. We've got a long history of it here, and we just like to protect it.
John?
I think this has already been asked, but in my terms, what my concern would be is that I'm a farmer. I've been farming, say, here for 10 years. And all of a sudden I decide that, I can do some other things on my property besides farming, which might be more lucrative than farming. So I could, like you mentioned, I can start out with a little fruit stand, and the next thing I know, I say, gee, I could expand that to, next thing I know, I've got a grocery store. And of course, the neighbors are sitting there saying, it was a nice farm, a few years ago. Now it's a business center, almost. And I think that there's some concern there. It's not a matter of the other way around. It's a matter of farming interests expanding into commercial interests, which could lead to all the problems we've had out of Cisco.
Yes, but with all due respect, that's a zoning enforcement issue for commercial, and that's where it would belong.
So you don't see that as, you're still saying that no matter what, the laws that we have in the books concerning zoning issues and things like noise and things like that, this does not supersede that.
That's correct.
But you did say that it might be a little more difficult on litigation.
Well, it could be. I mean, lawyers like to throw the kitchen sink into a lawsuit. I've heard.
You know all about that.
So, I mean, and, that's not to say it would be a major issue in litigation. Because of the way this bylaw is written, I think they would be very hard pressed to make an argument that this somehow supersedes the zoning bylaw, because it just doesn't.
I think it seems like the whole tenor is, consultative, encompassing. So I hear you use those words, educational, those kinds of things. Anyone else who has not spoken would like to comment on this from the Finance Committee? Anyone else in the public who would like to speak to this issue? Any last comments from David?
Yeah, I really, John, I think you would be doing our committee a favor by looking at Salisbury.
But I will, yes.
Because the courts, I think, took a very specific set of actions, at least as reported, that did not uphold the ZBA's position on the agritourism.
Okay, I will look at that, and I'll send you an email.
Okay.
Through Libby, I guess, and
Yep.
you can.
And
see
then
it.
that'll be public,
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so then
Yeah,
I'll,
absolutely.
how would does that get posted to the website, or how can we?
Probably part of our packet.
Okay, it'll be part of the packet, so you could go on the website.
Be curious.
To look at it, and I don't know if, you might, I'm not directing or anything, but if that clause is not, so substantive to your beliefs, you could amend it to take it out and bring it back at some future time or whatever, but let's take a look at the, yes, ma'am.
Oh, I just wondered what the process would be if we did decide that word could be struck.
Well, I asked town council
Yeah,
for
I'm
that.
sorry.
What would the process be if the Ag Commission or Dylan decided that word could be struck?
So, this is just a warrant article. There'll have to be a motion presented at town meeting. And when you present the motion, and it could be, if the Finance Committee decides to support this, I'm just saying, it could be, they'll make the positive motion deleting those words.
Oh, I see.
And
Okay.
also.
So if you let us know.
I
Go
I
ahead.
also indicated that the title to section 5 will have to be revised because in fact there is an agricultural commission here in Nantucket. so we would deal with those cleanup things in the motion.
Oh,
So when you
And then
make-
that gets published in the
Right.
warrant that gets sent out, so people would see it as it without that.
Right.
I'm not suggesting it, but that's an option to have some common ground. So again, thank you so much.
I have actually a
Oh,
question. Sorry. John or Michelle, or I forget your name.
John.
John. In light of all the Board of Health regulations on pesticides and herbicides and fungicides and what have you, your right to farm has some language in there that's pretty broad about what can happen and what can be used. If those regulations today get even more strict, does this hold our hand? And,
No,
okay.
no, it does not.
well, I want to thank you for coming and sitting at our table and having a conversation. It's very, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. Item I, appropriations Sconset Fire Station. Is there anyone here to speak to that?
I did indicate, Mr. Chairman, in my notes that the article just says to appropriate money, it doesn't identify the potential funding
right,
sources.
yeah.
So that could be an issue for the motion.
Yeah.
Didn't we have an article years
Yes.
ago?
We've had it
Every year.
so.
What happened?
We've seen this article in the past put forward, and last year it was withdrawn, I believe.
Yes, but typically and that's one of the reasons why the selectmen make me available.
Right.
Is
I
to
know,
help, right?
yeah.
Because typically, to say appropriate is not sufficient.
Right.
You'll notice in the warrant that it usually says, and to determine whether said sum shall be raised by taxation, transferred from available funds, or borrowed. I forget the precise language, but there's that typical language in a town-sponsored financial article.
Right.
And the only time it's really a problem is if you want to borrow for this, because there's no warning to the voters that borrowing
Right.
is going to be a funding source. So, bond council might have an issue with that.
Next item, J and K, CPC budget transfers and appropriations. Anyone to speak to that? The next item is a bylaw amendments, town sewer district. Item L, anybody here for that? Next, again, another bylaw amendment for town sewer district. I think Libby said that Board of Selectmen will be getting a report on that, and action will be taken. Appropriation cost reimbursement, is there anybody like to speak on that?
Is that mine?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna name it.
You'd have to recuse yourself.
I'll recuse
Sit over.
myself.
But you can stay sitting there.
I'll sit right here, official seat.
Okay.
And to the record, Cliff is speaking as an individual.
Yes.
Yeah, citizen, concerned citizen, very concerned.
So we didn't have we just had the article before us on Monday, so welcome to hear your intent, your article.
Well, after 3 years of trying to secure a building permit from a structure that was moved from 4 Monomoy Road, the process started in 2012 when the property was bought for, I think, around $5 million. It was advertised in the newspaper to be moved. Through the process of a friend of mine, we acquired the permission to move it. I secured HDC approval. I then went through the process of getting the permits and the moving permits, and at the 11th hour, the building inspector decided he thought it was something other than a structure or a building, which I'm under the understanding that that's not really his authority. So we continued the process. The structure was moved to 13 Somerset Road. I then went through the process of getting financing and secured an engineer. Long story short, I don't know if you ever talked to the building inspector, but to me he's very confusing, misleading. I think it's been deferred, denied, deflect, sent in 5 different directions. Last year he guided me through the permit process. I secured engineering documents for the foundation. I secured an engineer's letter that he could put the structure back together. And then after about 4 or 5 months of the building inspector's guidance, he had the other building inspector deny the permit. So then the process began again with lawyers to try to figure out what the problem was, and I could never get a clear understanding, neither could the lawyers after months of speaking to what he really wanted. And it's just kind of gone on like that. So it's time for me to move on. The property's been sitting there in stagnation when I could have developed it, and I could have moved forward, and I could have made money, and instead, I can't tell you how much money I've lost, but I'm just trying to, I'm not sure how to quantify it, but I'm trying to pay for the structure that was moved, to get it removed, to get it disposed of, and try to reimburse myself for the, all the engineering and lawyers, et cetera. And move on.
Any questions from the finance committee? Matt?
Mr. Chairman, Town Council. Hi, John. Hey, how are you? Good. Good to see you over there. I'll take a look for a while. I'm a little confused on your triage from this. Okay. And I guess, let me try to just, if I can frame this, if we as a committee were to approve this, can we put a funding source in A, and B, would we be overstepping our bounds as a committee to approve this, being that the town has not, would then be an admission of some liability?
Let me just pull this out here. I believe Cliff did include a funding source in here. Or the potential of several different funding sources. Sorry. Assistance whispering to me. Yeah. So it does include the various funding sources, so we don't have the problem that we do with the other one. However, my point is that town meeting can only appropriate money for a valid public purpose. And my understanding is, and I know, the town did receive a letter from an attorney demanding payment. That's really an issue not for the finance committee as to whether or not there's any validity to the claim. But I suppose if there were a court judgment against the town for reimbursement, or there was some kind of a legal settlement approved, then money could be appropriated for that purpose. But there was nothing like that. And there's no acknowledgement on the part of the town that there is any liability or responsibility. And until the appropriate town board that would have responsibility for dealing with a claim against the town, which I submit as the Board of Selectmen, until they acknowledge some liability through a settlement agreement, I don't think it's a valid public purpose for the town to just appropriate money for which there is no legal obligation to pay.
Can we use those comments directed to the board then to act on this on our behalf?
Well, I suppose you can request the board to take a look at it, but obviously it's up to the board to decide whether or not there's any validity to this claim and whether there should be a settlement entertained.
Is that the only avenue for redress to the, in Cliff's case, to the Board of Selectmen? Or is there a,
Well, we had a very strong demand letter from an attorney,
understood?
so they could file a lawsuit as well.
All right, so there is another avenue
Sure.
beyond.
Absolutely.
Anyone else from the public like to speak on this article?
You know what, if I just could say, one of not to belabor this, but even with just a settlement, one of the things you would want to make sure is that you obtain the release of any and all claims arising, because if you don't have a written release, you could be facing this next year, the year after, whatever. So that's why it's important that there be some acknowledgement by the town of liability and a written document or a lawsuit with a judgment before making any payment.
Cliff, anything else you want to have?
Oh, no, just trying to avoid personal attack. I mean, I find it unacceptable, appalling. I mean, that's why I got involved in town government as a result of what I went through at the airport. and I feel like it's been the same scenario where a public official blatantly just lying to me, lying to his bosses, and I don't see why, to get into personal attack with the selectmen or administration, or somebody can't move forwards, and that's what we had to do with the subcommittee for the airport, and then it finally came to the light. I don't know why we have to go these routes, and when it's just plain and simple. I mean, I can put together, a lot of people have it, the timeline and what was said and what was done. I've done everything entrusted in me. The town puts it's a bylaw to put in the newspaper to reuse the structure so all the stuff doesn't go to the landfill. We answered that. I followed every bit of guidance by the town. I did everything I was supposed to do, and like I said, I was lied to, I was misled, and it's cost me a lot of money. And we talk about lawsuits. Obviously, a lawsuit would incur damages. I'm just trying to get out of the mess I was put into as a result of the dishonest behavior of
So we have to
the
be
building
careful
department.
what we allege, I think.
Exactly, but it's all proven. I can prove it. It's over and over. I just went through it the other day again, and I have all the documents. Anyway, like I said, we went through it at the airport, and I guess we're going through it again.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Please resume your seat.
I'm back. Regular seat.
Let's see, the next Article O, secondary bylaw amendment, secondary lots. I'm sorry, Mr. Atherton.
I should have raised my hand on the sewer district articles.
Yeah.
I just want to make it a comment, because I'm concerned a little bit that you have a schedule, I think, calls for making, adopting and not recommending some of these articles shortly, the citizen articles. I'm not sure you intend to do that with the sewer articles, or will there be a chance?
Well, what we said was we're
place
waiting for whatever the administrative process for the board to weigh in on.
So you're going to wait
these.
for that process to
Yes.
deal with the sewer articles?
Yes,
Good, that's fine.
okay. Zoning map change, SR 20 to SR 5. Anyone here to speak to that? Yes, John, hi, have a seat.
Good afternoon. John Brescher. I represent one of the homeowners over in who lives on Sconset Avenue, who has requested that we file a citizen petition to change the zoning out there from SR 20 to, I think SR 5 might be a typo, it's supposed to be SR 1. Whatever it is 20,000 square foot zoning district now. Just about every lot out there is non-conforming. They're all about somewhere between 6 and maybe 10 or 11,000 square feet, and have it rezoned to 5,000 square foot zoning, just as a sort of a cleanup article.
So we heard, I don't know if you were here, we heard from, I spoke to Andrew Vorst today, which he said that the planning staff is actually encouraging, based on a position taken by the planning board, encouraging citizen articles for this year. Have you spoken to the planning board?
I have. I've been in touch with Andrew quite a bit, and sorry for being late. That was part of the earlier one that we went over on Woodbine Street, which I don't know if you want to take it out of order. I'd be happy to talk about that one. That's pretty benign one too.
So any questions of John on Article P? Any comments, Stephen?
Well, this is, for the planning board really, but as long as you're here, maybe you can tell us, what is the intent here? I mean, are people looking to subdivide some of these lots?
No, I just a cursory glance, I think of all of them, just one lot could even be subdivided because it has frontage on, a way.
looks like
Yeah,
this one there.
that's exactly it. Every other one, it's just, frankly, it's that they're so undersized, they've got very little ground cover, some of them are in the setbacks as it is. Most of these houses have been there since, I think, before the adoption of zoning, and it's really more of a cleanup article than anything else.
But to their point about what would they be able to do they can't do?
Not have a non-conforming lot, and anytime they have a non-conforming lot, a non-conforming structure, with a non-conforming lot, they're limited with the amount of ground cover that they have.
Okay.
They're either allowed the ground cover ratio of that zoning district or 1,500 square feet, whichever is greater. And for some of these properties too, they are cited in the setback, which currently is 30-foot front yard setback. My client in particular is cited 26 feet from the front yard lot line. So anytime he has to make any alteration to his house, he has to get approval from either the zoning board or a zoning administrator for, something relatively small.
Any questions? We've had a lot of people who are waiting, at the end, we'll ask for people who would like to speak on articles we've already been through.
You got it.
See, item Q, acquisition and various parcels on Sparks Avenue. Anybody here to speak to that? Item R, Mass General Laws Acceptance Dog License and Bylaw Amendment. Anyone here to speak on that? Bylaw Amendment on Coastal Properties. Bylaw Amendment on Animals. Would you like to come up and speak again?
Hello, I'm Suzanne Gale. I'm here as a citizen, not as your animal control officer at the time.
That's why you're not in uniform, right?
Correct. Last time I was in uniform because I was still working and we didn't have enough people, so I apologize. And I got in trouble for that, so.
You did?
So we're just trying to come up with some better bylaws that handle all animals, not just dogs. For Nantucket, our community is growing. We have a lot of people that have a lot of different pets now that we're having issues with. And we're not saying that they can't have these pets, but if they have the proper housing, fencing, etc. for them, they can still have it. So the first one was the nuisance bylaw, which I took way back when. We did have a bylaw that had to deal with dogs and fowl, and somehow it disappeared. I don't know where it went. And then we ended up with just dogs. So I'm trying to bring back pets and fowl into that nuisance bylaw. We would handle these animals the same as we do with a dog. So we have a nuisance animal, it would still have to go before, officers would go there and check it out, or animal control or the health department would still check it out. We'd have to do reports. If it's, try to tell these people different things they need to do to make it better for the animal and try to help them quiet the animal down if that's the case. And if that still is an issue, then like we do with a nuisance dog or a dangerous dog, we have a hearing. So I think for the nuisance animal, that's what we're trying to change, is for a nuisance animal, so we can handle all animals. The next one was the animal neglect. Dennis just came up with this. I basically just took their bylaw. It's basically dogs or animals left in a car on hot days. Also with animals that may need medical attention that might not be severe, but enough that someone thinks the animal needs to be looked at. It's just we're looking at a $50, and the next fine would be $100. It's considered a cruelty to animals, but we wanted to, say you were running into the pharmacy and the animal is fine, but still they shouldn't have done it. We could charge them with a bylaw of a $50 fine instead of charging them with cruelty to animals.
Oh, and
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Who is allowed to request that, can I say, David, I don't think your dog is being well fed, I want you to have it looked at, and if he doesn't do it, he gets a $50 fine? Or does
Negative.
it have to come from you?
It has to, just like right now with a dog, someone calls up, we investigate it, we tell them the different things that need to be done. If everything is there, technically you need food, water, and shelter for the animal. If an animal isn't, some of these beagle rabbit hunters, they have beagles. They're in looks like a chicken coop. As long as they're not sitting on their feces, they have plenty of water and they have shelter, they can be in that type of, we can't change that.
David?
Why, is there a reason this hasn't come up through your department, and that this isn't a department-sponsored set of regulations?
I've tried, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I've gone before, we've tried, like I said, I spoke with different, the agriculture committee, the health department, the other animal control officers, several farmers, different towns.
But
So-
you're under the auspices of the police department, is that correct?
Correct.
And so.
No one was, it's getting to the
No
point
one's
where.
listening to you, is
Yes,
what you're
so
saying.
as a citizen and speaking for some of the other departments and other people, some of the farmers, because you got some great farmers, but they're getting bad rap because someone decided, hey, I want a couple of birds in my backyard. So we're just trying to, a lot of these, they're pets, they're not farming animals. And people are like, oh, it'd be really cool to have this type of animal in my backyard, and they just, all it is trying to, at least an officer or animal control can go there and say, all right, you can have this animal, but you're gonna need this, this, and this, is basically, and if it still becomes a problem, we can find them. And if it still consistently be a problem, like we do with a dog or a dangerous dog, we can have a meeting before the selectmen saying, there's an issue with this animal.
And
As of right now, we can't do anything with, except for dogs.
Yeah, I just recall that you, I mean, I put it in the category of, this gives you the tools to do the job, your job.
Correct. Or whoever does animal control.
Right,
That could be a
right.
civilian, it used to be a civilian, right now it's under the police department. Who knows, it may go back that way, I don't know.
Other questions from the Finance Committee? Any member of the public who would like to speak to this article? Thank you so much, Suzanne, appreciate you coming.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
The next article is V, acquisition and disposition of poplar. John, you wanna?
Good afternoon again. I have clients who own on it's 148 Surfside Road, and as it turns out, through a rather creative survey a number of years ago, a subdivision plan conveniently omitted Poplar Street from it. And so as it turns out, the balance of Poplar Street runs right through my clients and where they're building a house. Everywhere else on Poplar Street has already been taken and disposed of by the town, and so this is just cleaning up
Paper road.
Paper Road. That's exactly it.
Again, would this fall in the bucket of things the planning board would do over time?
That is correct, and when I asked Andrew about this, he said, I strongly urge you to do it as a citizens article this year.
Okay, all right. Any questions? Anybody from? Oh,
And I was just gonna say, you were here the other day, my question the other day, and it would hold for the other one as well, is, as you're probably well aware, we've had unintended consequences come from yard sales. And, I don't know how large this piece of property is. Certainly the other one, part of Poplar is, so I think the issue, and I think we have asked that the newly formed real estate.
As a member of the newly formed real estate committee, I can assure you this one is really more of a cleanup article than anything. My clients assume that they had land from a survey from the 70s, and when in fact they basically surveyor, wink wink, nudge nudge, whited out Poplar Street, and so they're not getting any additional land that they thought that they thought they already had left.
So would it go through the yard sale program?
It would.
Okay. So when they bought the house, did they have a survey completed?
Well, it was vacant land at the time.
Okay, so did they
This-
have a
this
survey,
surveyor-
was it surveyed?
Yeah.
And so
And
this
then
was
said-
error committed by the surveyor?
I don't know that I'd call it error, more of a.
So a lack of recognition, there
Sure.
was a road
Yes.
going through?
Yes. You'd be surprised how many of these have occurred in the Surfside area over time.
Is the claim on a title insurance policy?
This has something to do with that, yeah.
Does Poplar run perpendicular or parallel to Surfside Road?
It runs parallel to Surfside. So as you can see from the GIS, where it basically it stops there. So when this property, should this property be taken and disposed of, it would only go to my clients would be the only logical people that it would go to.
So we talk about unintended consequences here. One of the unintended consequences of the planning board saying this is now the finance committee is getting into a whole new area of review. So,
I don't know, we still get the report from the planning board, right? And they're still gonna review these as real estate related articles.
they will, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
We're talking to Andrew, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
This only authorizes the selectmen to act. It doesn't-
Okay, okay. So that's on acquisition disposition, right? Okay. Thank you, John. Next one is zoning bylaw amendment. Anybody here for Article X? We have acquisition and disposition of Winoma Way. Anybody here for that? How do you pronounce that? Sakachaw Avenue. Anybody here for that? Zoning map change, Lug 2 to Lug 1. Anybody here for that? I think we had a sponsor here the other day. Zoning map change, Lug 2 to R40, BD. Anybody here for that? Tiny house and bylaw amendment and tiny house village district. We spoke to Isaiah when he was here. Is there anybody from the public who's here to speak on that zoning bylaw amendment? Okay, so I'll go back. Is there anyone here who would like to, as we go back and just look, I'm not going to read them all, but is there anybody who would like to speak? Okay, yeah, come right up.
Sorry. I didn't get here till 5 after, so I
Okay.
think you missed your call. I'm Nancy Holmes, I'm Catherine's assistant clerk. And Catherine went off island this morning, so she just asked me to bring forward some information to the board for their deliberations. In Massachusetts, approximately 2/3 of the town clerks are elected, and all of the city clerks are appointed, because in cities, they have election commissions.
Okay, explain that, could you, I don't know what that means. Election commissions.
That the town, the clerk in cities is not running the elections. They have a separate election commission, whereas town clerks run the elections.
Okay, where would you get that? I didn't know that. No?
So Catherine had acknowledged it is a trend to try to change elected to appointed clerks. However, it's not a successful trend with the voters. She had sent out a quick survey through the Mass Town Clerks Network earlier this week or late last week, and of the 37 communities that answered have a little bit of data.
Okay.
Of course, obviously, there's 351 towns in the state, cities and towns, but of those 37 that answered, 25 towns attempted to make the change and it failed resoundingly. In every instance there, the town clerk was opposed to the change. 2 towns changed from elected to appointed and then have subsequently changed back to elected. And 7 towns were successful at changing. 2 of those were changed to appointed during the transition of a new clerk. 3 towns did it as adopted charter. And 1 of them changed because the BOS assumed the duties of the clerk. So again, this is just a smattering of 37 towns she asked to answer, and these were those that responded in a 24-hour period. So just to give you a little
Okay,
information.
maybe maybe you might have a question, John?
Well, I have a question. I'm not sure that the way that survey was done, you can answer it, but, you know, I'd find it interesting to know why these things were unsuccessful.
Well, there is some, in Catherine's spreadsheet, there are some reasons, and I could email it to all of you. I only have 1 copy, but I think,
Take a minute and talk
yeah,
about it. if you
I
don't
think in general, the voters want to have the option to choose their own clerk for the electoral process. It's been done that way in Massachusetts since the 1600s in most New England towns, probably in many cities and towns, certainly throughout the country. I think they want that separation of power, and they want the choice to yea or nay their clerk. That's what I would take from what I've read.
I wouldn't assume that at all. I mean, unless somebody told me that.
Okay.
How many
exact number, but in Massachusetts, about 2/3 are elected, approximately 2/3.
I think I sent around a document
Yeah, and there's
from another
350
thing
within the
survey,
state. Yeah.
Yes.
and it was 2/3 elected, 1/3 appointed.
I think it's about that, yeah.
Yeah.
And all city clerks
Yeah.
are appointed.
Is there some linkage between being elected and being in charge of an election from any point of view?
Well, just the town clerk
Well,
or the
I guess
city
what I'm
clerk.
saying, I mean, I didn't know cities had electoral commissions. I assume every town clerk in every municipality or city ran the election, so.
I'm sure the city clerks are part of
Okay.
the electoral commission, but, you know, obviously, if you think about it, it makes sense. Who knows how many wards and precincts they have? It's a huge
But
undertaking in a
in
city.
cities, they're appointed.
In cities, they're appointed.
Okay, because they have an electoral commission.
Mhm.
I'm just, so. All right. Anybody else? Anyone from the public would like to speak on this? Thanks for coming, appreciate it. Anybody else to speak on any other articles? Which article?
I believe it's B, is it?
B?
Marble
Is
Way.
this Woodbine? Oh, Marble Way,
Way,
yes.
yeah.
Have a seat and
Yeah,
just
sure.
introduce yourself, and be glad to hear anything you have to say.
My name's Chris Fiscale. I'm just here to be an advocate for this particular article. Other than that, I really wouldn't know what else to tell you. If you have any questions about it.
Well, I know the sponsor, Sam, was
Sam.
out of town, or
That's
out
cool.
of the country, so we've emailed back and forth, and we distributed her kind of testimony to the group.
Cool.
You know, I've talked to some folks in the neighborhood who've echoed their support for this. I've talked to this group about that, but just tell us a little bit in your own words about what you're trying to accomplish.
I believe what we're trying, I shouldn't say I believe what Sam's trying to accomplish here is the fact that a couple of years ago, I might be speaking incorrectly here, but just surmising, a couple of years ago, a certain part of Marble Way was changed to, I believe it's called CTEC, and that is detrimental to the neighbourhood. I don't know whether anybody's familiar with the Marble Way. Marble Way was built, was developed by Billy Cassidy as a neighbourhood, and it's been built up very, very nicely as a neighbourhood, and everybody that lives in there with a child or a family environment. And unfortunately, this has happened, and we'd like to revert or change the CTEC zoning back to something that would be a little bit more in keeping with the neighbourhood, perhaps with I think maybe some light commercial. I think that's what she's applied for. And if you go up and down the street, if you've read what has been applied for, it seems to work very well around there. These particular properties have come up and they're becoming fairly densely, in fact, very densely.
We just have one conversation at a time, just from the end of the table. We couldn't hear, so I'm sorry, go ahead, Chris.
So it's become apparent that these particular pieces of property are going to be developed or are trying to be developed in a very dense development, which will be detrimental to that particular neighbourhood, and I think that's what she's applying for.
Stephen?
I understand that this is your zoning of your warrant article is coming about because of some things that you're already seeing that you don't like. Is that right? Or
It's actually not my warrant article, but I'm sitting here to
right,
speak
so
to it.
So
But I
it's coming
believe that's
about
correct.
because
Yes.
the whole neighborhood and you as a part, you don't like something that's already happening.
That's what I've just said. It's becoming apparent that there are 2 or 3 or maybe 4, and I'm not 100% sure, particular lots of land that were rezoned to CTEC. I believe that's what the zoning was, and this particular article is to I believe rezone to a less commercial, more in keeping with what is there, and that is correct. This is appearing due to the fact that that is coming to fruition.
Right. So
Yes.
that's what I'm asking. Are the things are the uses that are objectionable to the neighbors? Are they already in existence? Or are they planned? I mean,
they're coming to fruition. People are applying for major commercial developments in that situation.
Are you representing this?
No.
Oh, your names here, Woodbine.
I'm on Woodbine.
Oh, this,
He's on
I'm sorry,
Woodbine.
this is Marble Way, sorry. Okay.
So-
John-
so-
David. Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
David, yeah.
So my only reason for asking that is if these things are already being applied for under the current zoning, I'm not sure this is going to be helpful. I mean, maybe you've consulted attorneys, but I realize you're the messenger here and you're an advocate.
Do you know what? I'm just being an advocate, and somebody asked me to
Yeah, okay.
put my good looks in front of it.
David,
I have a
sorry.
chicken egg question. So was CTEC here when Marble Way was developed, or the other way around?
No, Marble Way was developed, and CTEC, I believe, within the last 4 years, maybe 5, a handful of years.
Yeah,
that
the
it was-
neighborhood predates the existence of CTEC in any location.
I think it was residential, commercial,
Yeah, it's RC.
It's RC.
So it
It's,
was our.
and we're
so-
trying to get rid of that at all, completely.
Right.
It was all RC, they made some of it R20, they made some of it CTEC, all of which is less intense, but it sounds like the neighbors would like it all to be R or something. Yeah.
and I live actually on the Bartlett's farm side of it, and I live in what is what one might call the more intense usage of commercial, and it really is. It's if you go down this dirt road, which is Marble Way, you can see there's been some very well put together commercial uses that are in keeping with the people in the neighbourhood, and I think this is the reason why this article has come up, is because that's not necessarily the case of what seems to be coming down the pipe. That's I think that's the meat and potatoes of it.
Any question, John?
Well, Steve asked a question, and I guess you can't answer it, but I want to make sure, and that is that have these things that are coming down the pipe, have they been applied for?
I believe the person that's applying for this particular thing that we are talking to understands, for want of a better word, and I might be speaking out of turn to answer your question, understands what she's doing and how she's doing it, if that answers your question. So I don't know whether something has been applied for with regards to what she's trying to address. One particular project has been approved by the HDC. One project is in the process. Unfortunately, being on a small island, you hear certain things that perhaps you shouldn't hear. There's one project that I believe is in the application in front of. I might be speaking out of term. Where would an MCD go? Even though I'm a developer, I should know that. The planning board. So there's one application coming to fruition in front of the planning board. I hope that helps you. Does that help you?
Yeah, have you people talked with the planning board about this?
I have not talked with the planning board about this. As have we people talked about the planning board? I'm sure there are some people that have talked to them. Have we been in front of the planning board?
Yeah.
We have not been. I have not been in front of the planning board, and the project has not been in front of the planning board.
Okay, but as, there seems to be some, you've got some opposition to, and the question is the opposition in some form then before the planning board?
I don't believe the application has been in front of the planning board, and therefore I don't think anything has gone to the planning board. I believe that's the question. My apology, I just don't want to misinform you. You seem like
Any other questions? Any other questions or comments from the public? Thank you, Chris.
Okay,
Appreciate
thank you
it.
very much for your time. Much appreciated.
Any other, as we go through the list, anybody else who'd like to speak? John? Did you want to speak, sir?
I was just here to listen on that
Okay,
topic.
okay.
And
You
I
wanna-
also support the zoning change.
Okay, all right. Great.
If that counts.
It counts a lot. It counts a lot.
I just wanted to listen, see if
Okay.
there's any opposition or.
Okay.
That's all.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
John?
Hello again.
We Woodbine?
I am
Okay.
Woodbine. Somewhat similar to the last one over on Poplar Street, in that, except that this one is I believe there's a plan that's attached to the warrant article, and usually picture's worth 1,000 words. And basically, it's the end of Woodbine Street, and I represent the clients on both sides who would be looking to purchase this portion of the paper street. At this point, on Woodbine Street, they're the only two who use it. They can't subdivide. They may or may not help their septic.
You said the clients on both sides; those are separate owners,
That is correct.
and they just want to share.
They're working together cooperatively, and would love to. They understand that there will need to be easements in place for access, and they're looking to do this. And they approached Andrew, and Andrew suggested they file a citizens article and enter the citizens article.
Questions, David?
Has Andrew just gotten skittish about this stuff?
I think the planning board, that was their direction. That was their direction, and I understand from Andrew, that's what they communicated to the board of select. Based on town meeting action on zoning last year.
Last year at town meeting, Andrew felt, he put in several articles to change zoning, and quite frankly, he was changing it to a more dense approach. Several people got up and talked about it, and every one of his articles that I remember that called for an increase in density got nailed. And finally he withdrew. I think at some point he just started saying, I withdraw the article, because he didn't want to go through it anymore. Well, enough was enough. He was I talked to him afterwards, and he was pretty upset about it.
Great.
John, where did the lots access? Off Weed Weaver?
No, it would be off of Woodbine.
Oh, so the existing Woodbine.
Exactly, and then it would come to, their access would still be there, but they would have a shared access.
It looks like a cul-de-sac right now in the middle of that road.
Any questions? Anybody else? Comments? Anybody from the public? I guess.
I mean, we asked that all of these get pitched over to
Yes.
the committee that I guess you're on. So.
Well, not zoning.
No,
Oh,
all the
real
yard
estate.
sale. Yeah.
Okay.
Eventually,
So,
we
Bob
would
Barber would buy.
clearly have to recuse myself, but yeah. That's
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys.
We're doing what Andrew did. We're not going to act on it.
So we're going to go right to the review of the financing options for sewer project. This is a presentation that Brian, I'm sorry. I'd like a motion to close the public hearing. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no. I'd like to call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order. So any approval of the minutes from December 7th? They were in your packet. Any additions, deletions, corrections? No, there weren't? Oh, okay.
We didn't have them ready.
All right, so we'll take that off. All right, let's see. Okay. Review financing option for sewer project. I'd asked Brian, since the sewer project will be a big item or issue to review and discuss this this year. I've asked Brian to come and speak to that and give his, yes. Hi. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for coming. No. No. And I know this is a presentation from several months ago, so if you want to give us any updates or actions that have taken since then, we'd appreciate it.
So primarily, the presentation didn't change from when I went back to the selectmen on the 6th, other than the only difference between the 27th of July presentation and the 6th was we had actually heard from the state that the Nantucket Warren's Landing area in Somerset, which we had always believed would end up qualifying, but we weren't entirely sure, given the number of Cape communities that were going to be submitting for sewer. That one we believed might qualify. But then in consultation with Woodard and Curran, we had made a presentation, I believe, on the 27th or very quickly thereafter in another meeting. They believed that Monomoy would qualify if we connected the what's affectionately known as the plus parcels, the unconnected town pieces. If we merge those two into one project, a larger scope project, they believed that we could qualify for the 0% funding for both of those projects. So when it originally correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but when it originally came out of the sewer planning work group, it had always been Monomoy and Schimmel, I think, is what had been. But when the opportunity came to be able to get 0% financing on Monomoy, if we connected it with a piece that actually could qualify for the funding, the selectmen at that point decided to authorize us to submit the application for those pieces. So I given this general presentation in July to the selectmen, and then in October we received preliminary word that that the projects have been rated high enough. All 4 of those particular projects have been rated high enough to qualify for 0% fund. We're just waiting for the actual written document, but Woodard & Kern has already been informed that they will. So at the October 6th meeting, we represented the impact calculator that we had developed to recalculate an 80% spread of 0% interest, 80% being only construction costs are eligible for at 0% through the state revolving fund. Design costs are not eligible for that. So we had done a calculation on an 80-20 basis to give them an idea of what the new numbers might look like to homeowners, which is where they came to the 60-40 split that they voted on at that meeting. So primarily, and I actually have, I believe the 60-40 is, I can put it up on the screen if you want to see what they actually saw. So the only thing that's changed from this presentation that I gave in July was just the split that they ultimately voted for and what that would look like. Everything else, the entire context of the wording has really not changed in terms of what betterments are and how they're applied and what the process is. That is all the same. There are a couple things that we did talk about in there in terms of the length of the betterments. Right now, the statute allows for a 20-year apportionment and statutorily requires 5% interest on the unpaid balance on a betterment. There, I have to actually look because I don't remember the statute off the top of my head. There are currently a couple things going on right now at the State House. There's a possibility that we could file a home rule petition to seek legislation to allow us the opportunity, doesn't require us, but the opportunity or the option to extend the betterment period from 20 to 30 years, which would help the homeowners and spread out the cost to them over a little bit longer period. There's also, within that legislation, home rule petition, if we did do that, we would also request the ability to set the interest rates at no more than 2% of the borrowing costs. Because statutorily right now it's automatic 5%. There's no option. Okay, so we would be able to ask to do that. Now there has been a bill that has, I believe, advanced to the Senate as of now. That was filed by, I think it was Representative Madden actually, that would automatically do this. Give communities the ability under that statute to do that. The governor actually in his, what I think he's calling municipal modernization, has actually done the very same thing to extend it. One of the things that we're looking at right now, and I have expressed this to the selectmen, I think potentially going to 30 years is a really good tool. However, we're in a situation where, as I understood it, and again, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the sewer planning work group was of the opinion, and I believe the board is of the opinion, that they do not want any of the costs to be borne by the sewer users that are already connected for these projects. I think that's the way I've understood it. And if we went to 30 years, then there's a piece that has to be borne by somebody. Because by going with the state revolving fund and the 0% interest, the maximum length of an amortization for that debt is 20 years. And when you do the portion on the potential portion on the general fund, and then you do the betterments for as it was currently voted by the selectmen, the 60%, the aggregate of those two covers the debt service in the years. Okay. Right. If you on a 20-year basis, if you go to 30 years, then for that 20-year period, you have a shortfall because the betterment payment is being reduced because it's being lengthened. And while whatever fund it may come out of would make it up, it would not make it up until the 21st year. So for the first 20 years, we have to find a solution for that small gap. You know, I think typically something like that probably would normally be funded just through the rate, but I think people, there's a sentiment that they want this cost to be either borne by a portion through the tax rate and the rest covered by betterment, which, unless we found some other agreeable solution, would really preclude us from going to 30 years at this point. So I know Falmouth has gotten it, so I'm actually trying to, the finance director over there and I have actually been playing phone tag to try to, because I'd like to see how they're going to sort this out, and I'm really not sure how they're doing it quite yet. But that's really the only change from this entire document. You know.
And you said you had something to share.
Yeah, we can actually put. I can put up the change to the calculator that we can create.
Shine on your eyes.
And the other thing that we actually have started to do, just to let you know, I think we actually we did tell something. This went through. Obviously, this was part of the capital program committee as well. We have started working with Woodard and Curran to look at updating the costs to ensure that they're to ensure where they should be, because those were actually developed a little while ago. Okay, so what we have here is across the top, obviously, is the four areas in total. We have the original estimates that had been provided to us, the number of connections that our current actual connections that could be connected the minute the sewer is done. We have the estimated number of connections based on the zoning within the areas where people could have additional houses or whatnot on the lots that could potentially connect. So what we've done is on a 60-40 basis, so doesn't matter which one, the betterment would be on the top, the remaining piece would go to the tax rate. Now, the statute for betterment there's no specificity in how you have to do it. It doesn't say if you create a betterment for sewer, it has to be calculated this way. It leaves it open as long as it's, I guess what they normally say is fair and consistent across whatever the area that you're doing. So typically, one of the ways that people would do it is they would just take the amount of the betterment in the needs area and they would apply it amongst all of the known number of connections. So if we did that, each betterment in the Nantucket Warren's Landing area would be $51,000 to every homeowner. The estimated impact is calculated by amortizing it over 20 years. That amount, the $2,778 that's in that calculation, would actually go to onto their tax bill in the third and fourth quarters when the actual tax bills are mailed. One thing to note about a betterment is when you apportion it, whether you apportion it for 1 year or 20 years, there's a first priority lien attached to your house. So that is one thing that does happen through this process as well. So then what we tried to do is there was a lot of discussion in the sewer planning work group. There's been a lot of discussion amongst the selectmen. During the sewer planning work group, we tried to look at some various other sources or other alternative methods to calculate the betterment. One of the ones that we settled on was using the land value for each particular lot in a particular needs area as a percentage of the total land value for that particular area. We did consult with legal counsel, and they felt that because that we were only using land value and we're not using the value of the structure, that it would be a fair and consistent method to do it. So then we have calculated the betterments for every needs area based on the land value for the houses within that. And in order to get an idea as to how close to applying it equally across the area was it, I took an average for every needs area just to see how close they were. Were they really disparate or were they fairly similar? The 20% portion would have of the project cost would have to be borrowed at market rate. Cinder told us to use 3.5% right now. and we've used 20% for the betterment. So in every scenario, we've also calculated, the one thing that this has not done is these numbers, we have to, now that our values have been certified, we have to go back in and update the values, because this is usually the value, the most recent values when we did this, which was, I think, 2015, this was 2014 data at the time, so we have to update it for the actual new certified values to make some changes. And the next step for us as well is to go in and update all of the land values in every one of the needs areas to get a better idea of what, because we want to use the most current data as we move forward, and now that the valuations have been certified, we can update that. The other thing that we have to do is there is a significant amount of land bank land spread out through all these areas. We have to remove that because they can't be built on. And if there's any we have to review every lot that is vacant to determine whether it's buildable or not. And those would probably more than likely will have to be removed unless there's the potential that it could be built on. So this is the spreadsheet that we discussed with the selectmen after we made additional changes based on the knowledge that we were eligible for 0% financing for all those 4 particular areas versus when we had done it. The one other thing that we're internally working on is we're working on doing a comparator sheet so that everybody can see what the work group recommendation was based on the set of factors that we had at that time versus the changes, so that we can see the delta between the two to see what that looks like. Yes.
I'm assuming that this is, that the assumption built in here is that the debt structure doesn't change.
Well, see, the 0%.
I mean, the total debt structure.
Right. The total debt, it's built. Yeah, it is built on no change.
It's on like a flat.
It is. Typically, that has been the way the SRF has done it. The one thing that we have to keep in mind as we do this, which is why we've kind of talked to Cindy a little bit more about this, is SRF. We don't have any say in how the SRF structures their debt, the revolving fund. They structure it in the most favorable terms that they're going to be able to get, and then pass the schedules to us. So I can't tell them, no, I want level debt. They do whatever they can borrow at any time. So once we're in, and when we have temporary funding from them, they can go out and permanently borrow it. They will send us what the debt schedules look like, but we have no ability to impact how they structure the debt. But it's also 0%, and the amount, the difference between what we would be paying in interest is certainly more.
And so the assumption is that probably.
It's going to be very similar to how we structured it. There's not going to be much change. I haven't seen them get very crazy with how they do
When
it.
I look at a number, these numbers probably are going to be high numbers. I'm talking about text.
Well, the numbers here are going to change because don't forget, these are not using the most current valuation, which I have to update. So,
But also, but all things else being equal, these things are probably going to be, they're high numbers relative, because I would expect some debt to be, as you move forward, some debt's going to drop off.
They're not high numbers, John.
they're not high at all. They're pretty. They would be, if it happened right this instant, those would be pretty much accurate in how it would be.
Right this instant?
Absolutely.
They're not going to happen right this instant.
Then the changes that are going to impact them essentially are going to be property valuations. I mean, the debt structure would be fairly close to what we have.
Well, property valuations as well as the cost of.
The only other change would actually, would be the change in construction costs would
That's
change
probably
these
your
numbers.
biggest risk
Right,
there.
but other than that, those numbers will not, the tax numbers should not fluctuate much from that, everything being equal.
Okay.
It's also worth pointing out that the sewer work group settled on a different split than what the selectmen settled on.
They did.
Yes.
And that is for the two groups to reconcile.
And theirs was 40-60 or 50-50?
Sewer planning work group was 50-50.
50-50, okay.
Which came about after much discussion.
Right, yeah.
They went the gamut
Right.
in terms of what they felt was comfortable in the tax rate, and we spent, I will say, we spent many meetings
I'm sure,
putting
yeah.
these numbers on the screen and going through, looking at what it did and everything. So it was certainly they did a lot of work to come up to 50-50. I did the very same work for the selection over a couple meetings, putting this calculator through its paces. So, and they came to a number. So,
And will that number come to this group?
It would
as-
come, it would have to come in an article because,
Okay.
Obviously, it's my, I shouldn't say obviously, excuse me. It's my recommendation to the people that will be advancing the article that the general fund side be done through a debt exclusion because we cannot fund that through normal Proposition 2.5 levy limit growth on an annualized basis. The debt service will be too large.
But, you know, so you'll have an article that will talk, or a series of articles that will be a 40-60.
Yes, it would be, the articles would be allocating the split and asking to borrow the money, and then there would be the subsequent vote for the debt exclusion.
So as we can ask you to come up with different scenarios.
I can do, I'm sitting here right
based
now, all we
on-
have to do is plug numbers in three
Right.
spots and it'll change the whole entire thing.
Right.
So when you get to the point where you're working on that, I'm more than happy to sit here and
There's a big change going from 50-50 to 60-40 numbers.
Right, well, the one thing that which is why I'm putting this together to show, because there is a big change between 60-40, but the one thing that as I've mentioned to some people in the discussions, has been that when the sewer planning workers did it, we didn't have the clarity on the 0% funding that we had at there. Now, I'm not saying that would change anybody's decisions, I'm just saying that the numbers do change. When you take 80% of the debt load on a project and you fund it at 0% interest, the numbers are a little bit different, so.
I would think, yeah.
But I think that the rationale that the selectmen applied was because it went to zero, the overall dollar changed. The counter argument to that is, irregardless of how you finance it at what rate, it's a policy decision. Should it be 50-50, 40-60, 60-40?
And I'm not gonna weigh in on their policy.
Right.
No, I understand, but I think that.
My job was to create this to do it, so.
I guess it'll be, it's up to us, but it's important for us to be clear. The warrant articles, as I think they're gonna come, will be, we're gonna take this amount of money and get it this way. It won't be a clarity around the split and why, and I think that's part of our obligation.
I think the article will have to, or the motion, I don't know if the article has to do it, but the motion, I could be wrong on that, so please don't, I think that the motion would have to do the split, or the article would have how it was gonna be split.
No, I know, but I mean, I'm talking about, that's not the article's gonna come in some confusing way with dollars, and we're gonna get the money from this. I think in our motion, it's gonna have to be very clear, and I think that's our we have a big obligation in this process to inform the public, because I don't think it's gonna be well informed with the article itself.
Well, I will say that I'm finalizing a little bit of it. There is, they've asked for an outreach group to work through and go through, and I don't know what the shape is exactly going to be. I know the first thing is a newsletter that's going to be.
Well, it should have started a year ago, so, because, as you know, there's a lot of sentiment around this being all general fund. But this should be all general fund, it should be all, sewer users, so there's not consensus in the community.
The community of Harvard, Mass. actually put together a 4-page Q&A of the same subject, because they were going through the sewer commission and then work groups, and it was a great document that went out to the general public. And also we questioned, I think, last time, whether or not there's any tax deductibility on any of the monies paid by the citizens over time.
Well, the question was about betterment.
Betterment, yeah, the betterment part, I'm calling betterment, the principal part, the answer is no.
Right.
But the interest that they pay is a deductible. Should be, yes.
Well, I don't know if the interest associated with the betterment is or not, because the betterment, and again, I'm not a tax
I looked at
advisor.
another, I forget the community in Mass, but I read that today.
That it did? That it did? Okay, both federal and state?
Because that was part of a Q&A, it was going back to townspeople saying, hey, don't worry, at least a small.
$2.
Yeah, flex will be,
So, okay, Craig, yeah.
Question for Brian, do we know the construction cost increases at this point?
We don't, we're still working with Woodard and Kern to figure out what they would do. And, and then when we do it, we'll advance them all to the year, whatever the increase that they're suggesting is will be advanced to the year that they believe that bids will be open and construction will start.
and I think very importantly, when this goes before town meeting with a construction estimate, goes up? No. How does it get handled if it goes?
Well,
The users don't get, you explain it because it's,
well, if it goes up, it's, so once we have approval for funding through the SRF, if
The
cost-
SRF is what?
State revolving fund, which
Okay.
is the 0%
Right.
mechanism. So two things would have to happen. If it goes up, the state revolving fund would obviously, they will, whatever the increases are, they'll recover, but we would have to go back to town meeting and get authorization for whatever that is for borrowing. However, the other piece of that is typically, there's no clear, it's not clear cut, but this is how bond council interprets it, so, because we've already asked this question. If debt is being issued as part of a debt exclusion, and you need supplemental funding and it's going to be borrowing, if it's more than 10% of the original project cost, you have got to have another ballot vote.
Ooh.
So,
But the project continues,
well,
or starts, commences.
it can be commenced, absolutely, but you have that limit that you,
and so I think I was the one who initially raised this question, and I raised it in the form of putting a collar around the overall construction cost.
Yeah, right.
Because if it's not collared,
Right.
and then the numbers go up dramatically, well, you're into the project and you're gonna end up continuing on the project.
Right.
Who's gonna pay for it? That's what we used to be here,
So, I mean,
So
we have-
remember that. I mean, bring that, we have to remember.
No, I
that.
think it's it's a valid.
Right, no,
it's a
I know.
real valid point.
No, I agree.
Because if you go, let's say you go with a
Right.
60-40 split.
Yeah.
And the town mismanages the project,
Right.
the contractor screws
Right.
up, and now the costs, go up 50%.
Right.
The homeowner is left.
Or maybe we say you can't start the project, and, I mean, I don't know, I mean, let's, we can talk about contingencies.
It's gonna take so long from the time they break ground on the first portion of the project to the end that I don't know if we'd be able to say that.
Well, I think what we tried to have a discussion about in the work group was, okay, you know what your costs are gonna be when you start out. We know that they can go up or down. Let's put, I call it a collar, but basically let's put a collar around the overall cost. If it goes up 10%, fine, it'll get absorbed. If it goes up more than that, my argument would be that's the town, it shouldn't be the risk of the individual.
Right, yeah, agreed.
And what you were saying is that once the costs are set, the individuals.
Well, with respect, so what I think you're talking about is under the betterment statute, in the beginning of the project, once we get ready to proceed, we're obligated to send every homeowner within the area that we're constructing and will be issuing a betterment. We're required to send them a notice that estimates what the betterment will be, okay? When the project is complete, then we are obligated within 6 months to issue the betterment for a particular piece of property in the area, okay? The statute says that cannot, the betterment we issue cannot be more than the estimate. I think that's what you might, yes.
Okay.
So, there is.
And is there some linkage to the estimate based on has to be linked, you can't have you can't sandbag the estimate?
More question.
No, sandbag, I mean, the sandbag, the estimate believe me, I've been through
Are they
this.
sandbagging the estimate on the asphalt?
No, no, believe me, no, I know more about every single dollar, so.
We will do our very best to make sure the estimate is.
Reflects the budget.
Reflects what we believe the cost will ultimately be.
And that'll be our charge to make sure they do.
So there's
Any questions? Any questions?
Yeah,
Stephen?
I just said this process is gonna take a long time. Exactly how long do we think it will take from the time we, put the first shovel in the ground till the last pipe is laid and functional and this is all done? Is it a 4-year process, a 9-year? What are we looking at? I mean, the reason we're asking.
Originally, we had
we approved $15 million for a building in April, and 7 months later, we realized we were off by 12 or 13%. In 6-7 months. So now if we're looking at 9 years out, I mean, who knows what can happen in the world?
I don't believe it would be that long. I don't think it would take 9 years. I also, my understanding is from Woodard and Kern as they work through this is that vertical construction is seeing much larger increases than horizontal construction is, and that they're not seeing the 10 and 15 and 20% increases like you're seeing for vertical construction right now for sewer. There's a lot of sewer companies that are very interested in want to do work, so they're not seeing those types of increases. That's not to say that we're not going to see some increases, which we clearly are, which is why we're working and we're pushing them to get the numbers along the timeline that they believe for the projects to be started and bids to be open, so we would know what the numbers we're dealing with are. But I don't believe that we'll see those types of numbers based on
So,
my conversations.
you know, just the most recent conversation I had with, which was today with all the partners entities, and I think they spend a lot of money. And they keep their fingers on the stuff all the time, but as of, you know, the current thinking is actually escalations are going down significantly. China is dumping steel because their oil prices are going down. Which makes me makes me wonder why we got asked for $2 million when that event is happening too. But John?
Yeah, Jim, you brings up an interesting point. You know, in any construction project, you can do it in this period of time, or you can do it in this period of time, depending on how you organize the project.
Right.
I mean, I can remember people saying to me, "You can't build a plant, takes you a year and a half to build a plant." Well, we built one in 6 months. We actually built one in 3 months. It was operational in 6. So you can do it. It just you use a little different methods. I think the same would apply here. So I guess the question I would have, I think the question we have, one of the questions would be, how long is the project going to be?
Right. That's a good question.
I mean, I really think that's it.
We don't have the answer. We don't have the answer to
Spending
that
more to
today.
get something done faster is better because, you know, you're certain of what your costs are.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on. Okay. Joe?
What happens if this fails at town meeting?
It fails at town meeting. Doesn't
So
happen.
there's done, we never
Doesn't
goes
happen.
up and just go through the cycle again the next
We get
year?
another sewer work group that Mr. Worth will chair. So the next item on the agenda is to look at
Let me
the.
say, I mean, this, you know, I don't know how, there are a few members of the sewer plant work group that are more than a little upset about what the selectmen did. This is not
And are vocal about it and may
Yeah,
speak
vocal about
publicly
it.
at town meeting and.
and depending upon how the outreach goes, it may not.
We've all had conversations, and some of these numbers, you know, we're floating around, and, you know, just people are like, wow, this is a big number, and why do we want to do this, why do we have, you know.
But they haven't come in with the big guns that say that all the rich people in Monomoy, they're going to pay for this. So.
Including Jim.
No, I'll have to. I
He's
will.
out of it, Simo.
Yeah, no, I'm in it.
Well, I think
Simo's in it.
I think Joe's
Simo
point,
is Monomoy.
Yeah, even
Simo's
focus is
Monomoy.
Monomoy. The map is screwy.
So I'll have to work another 5 years, maybe 30 years.
I think Joe's point's important though. I mean, this may not
Yeah.
be a slam dunk.
No,
because,
no.
you know,
I don't.
Because the
believe
outreach
me.
hasn't
I'm going to
been
be out there.
You know, I mean, people haven't been talking about it. So by the time it crops up after the holidays,
Right.
people are going to have 3 months to sink their
Yeah,
teeth into this
right.
thing, and they're not going to do it, and they're not going to think it's been well thought out.
No outreach, and Woodard and Company would be hard pressed to show much in the way of alternatives that they've looked at on lower
Yeah.
cost. And that's always been
Yeah, I mean, we watched Richmond Company do it 2 years in a row, and we all thought it was silly that they didn't start their outreach sooner.
Right.
We're doing the same.
And we know the hospital started in August for a April town meeting. So for their. So
Quick question.
Okay.
To you, David, the construction, were they contemplating construction during the summer or not? If the project ever got that
No.
far? Because that would obviously add to your costs, because you have to
Right.
mobilize.
I don't believe that they are. I believe that they're anticipating 2 construction sites.
It hasn't gone to. So, but let's look at your timeline.
Okay. Looks great, right?
So Libby's not here, so all the changes we've noted on our timelines, I know I have many annotations on mine. Don't we have a meeting with the capital program committee before February 1st?
Yes, Tuesday.
It's on Tuesday the 15th.
Yeah,
On the
excellent.
timeline, it says
And then,
Capcom review of recommendations. On,
oh, I only
page
have one
14.
page.
Tuesday.
December 15th.
Okay.
Here in the community room downstairs.
Jim, it's the thing that came out today. It's got
Okay, sorry.
a lot of,
So can we talked a little bit about, I sent an email around about getting talking about the 10-year capital plan. Can we do that the 15th as well?
Is that the email that?
Yep.
Okay. So, I'm working with Cinder on that.
Okay.
I don't think she's gonna have the debt program for 10 years, so, for the 10-year plan done by the 15th.
Okay.
We started it, she's been out, so we had the conversation today. I can push, but I will not be in the packet. If I get it, it'll be
Okay.
that Tuesday morning and I bring it that night.
So I think what we'll do is we'll listen to the Capcom folks. We will hear and perhaps ask questions, but I believe, as I said, sent around any kind of, the other thing to remember is the Capital Program Committee is a subcommittee of this committee. That's sometimes I think that gets lost. And so I recommend that we'll listen to them, maybe ask questions. But any kind of recommendations we make, I think, need to be informed about the things I circulated, the 10-year plan, and what else did you say?
Well, you asked me to get
A couple things,
the
whatever
10-year
was-
plan for any borrowings that are included in the
Right.
in the Capcom
And there was
recommendations.
something else, so whatever was in that email. So, does that seem like a reasonable approach to have that as a second conversation?
Did, Brian, you met with Phil?
Yeah.
Okay, so his plan is to put together an executive summary and send it out to,
Which he has, and he's waiting to see if Cinder can pull off some budget to get even 17 done, which hopefully we could. So the plan is that Phil Stanbaugh, the chairman of the Capital Program Committee, has put together an executive summary. And then behind the executive summary will be the 2 10-year plan that the Capital Program Committee has moved forward for 17 and then the out years through, I think it's 26, if memory serves me correctly, for both the general fund and the enterprise fund. And hopefully everything will be cleaned up, and then behind that.
But that hadn't been. But I didn't think that Beyond 17 had been updated.
It has. We have the new plan is all in there in the software that we're using, and they have seen all the itinerations as they've made changes and moving things around in years.
Okay.
So that is I think it's 2 or 3 pages for each, either general fund or enterprise fund projects by name, number for all the years, and then cost all the way out for all 10 years with totals for both. And then behind it, hopefully the plan is to also present you only the 17 documentation for what was recommended. There's still cleanup going on in terms of descriptions and other information needed for 18 through 26. The plan is to give you the 17 individual project listings with descriptions and costing and pictures and everything that have, so that you have all, for 17 you have everything that they had received and what they based their recommendation on.
And we'll rely on you to kind of give some color to the.
there's a lot of color.
Okay. Okay. So I think we want to set up another meeting to talk about those items in my email to you, but also to have a more thorough conversation about capital projects. Is that all right with the group? And when do we talk about the sewer project?
Right now it's Tuesday, the 19th of January. But usually that's just a budget.
That's right. I'm talking about the capital project. Well, that
probably would have on the list. It says review. Well, it says warrant articles in February, so I don't know if that's when you would do it.
But is that coming the 15th? That's part of capital programs? Sewer?
Suggestion?
assuming that the board of selectmen are gonna submit an article, or at that time when the article is submitted, I think that's when this should take up.
Okay.
Because right now, until then, it's a lot of conjecture. And if you actually put the article in, then you get the secret key.
Okay.
That's a good point.
That's true.
But is it coming from capital programs, the sewer project?
No, the sewer projects, the numbers are in the schedules that they had seen, those were, those are separate articles being advanced, I believe, by
So-
the board.
Not updated.
Having the article from the selectmen, is that, I mean, that could be February or March,
No.
or, no, end of January, okay,
Before the public hearing. Plenty of time.
okay. All right, does everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So make a note of that, Lynn? Okay.
Does this general schedule work for you, Mr. Chairman?
I'll ask the
Your
group.
committee, I guess, I'm sorry.
Anybody have any objections to it? So I know there's a lot of meetings here. I think in the last couple, thanks under Matt's leadership, we were able to skip some meetings, so we'll,
We can tape some and potentially move
Yeah.
things around later, but I
Yeah.
think, the schedule's fine.
everybody,
It's
I
okay.
do too. I think it has to change
okay.
as we get in.
Good. Thank you. Anything else to come before us today? Is there a motion to adjourn? And I appreciate the time you took to listen to the citizen warrant article, folks. I think that was a good thing. So
Is there maybe an option to, on a discount basis, to prepay the veteran charge?
There's not really any discount, and we know we do save your interest costs. You do, under the betterment law, when you get the notice of the actual betterment, you have 30 days to make a decision whether to pay it all, pay a portion, and if you pay a portion, then you would apportion the remainder, and you can apportion it for, it's a minimum of 1 year, a maximum of 1. So that's the only.
There's no prepaid,
Prepaid discount, that's what we're looking for.
There isn't any, sorry.
Early payment discount.
As you're saying, the betterment is not tax deductible, but it does,
The
it adds
principal,
to your basis of your
the
tax.
principal is not deductible because it's considered an improvement, which you can add. As I understand it, again, I'm not an advisor, it supposedly does add to the basis of your house. That's correct.
And also, that doesn't include any of the connection fees
No, it does
or
not.
taking out your septic system.
But I want people to run around and say, Brian told me
Ten
that's
thousand?
next.
It's a huge, fee.
taking the trench as 10 and taking out your whole septic is probably
So 30?
Oh, yeah.
No,
Depending on how long you have to go between your house and the stuff in the road.
Yeah, plus, I mean, think about the rush of business that all these companies are gonna have to do the work. I mean, get in line or pay more money to do it. That's the other thing.
If this thing passes town meeting, literally,
Imagine you just installed a brand new system.
Well, you're talking,
You have 25 years to go.
we gotta get funded.
That's gonna be.
That's gotta be submitted to,
Maybe we change the
EPA,
user number.
and then we have to open bids.
Yeah, maybe we have to tax that.
Yeah.
Because that